I just want to remind everybody that this is part 2 in a series, so if you missed part 1, click the link in the top right of your video now. It has been a few days since my first post, and a lot has happened since then. I am exhausted, I am stressed out, and I'm writing again because I don't know what else to do. And many of you have warned me that watching the tape would be a terrible idea and have suggested that the knowledge of what's on that tape isn't worth the risk. Others have said that I wouldn't be able to stop thinking about it if I didn't watch it, and a few have asked that if I do watch the tape, to try to have Steve with me. And since it's been a few days, I broke down the days into entries for ease of reading. Thursday, October 12th. I called Steve to tell him about the second tape. Unfortunately, his cell went straight to voicemail. I tried to call him a few more times throughout the day. The same thing occurred. I was starting to get worried. I had begun to consider driving out to his house to check on him, but he finally called me back later that night. "Hey Steve, I'm glad you're alright. I need to ask you about..." He cut me off abruptly. "I do not want to talk about the tape." I was caught off guard by this, but he continued. "You have no idea what you are getting into. Please, just forget about it." Before I could respond, Steve hung up on me. He didn't respond to any more of my calls. I decided I should probably heed his advice, as well as most of the comments on my original post. I would forget about the tape. I didn't do anything as melodramatic as burning the tape, but I did throw it out. I figured that putting it out of sight at least would allow me to move on from it. I woke up in the middle of the night, standing in my living room. I was alarmed, but quickly realized I must have been sleepwalking. This had been something that occurred frequently when I was a child, but it had been a very long time since the last episode. I would have just assumed it was a minor relapse until I realized what I was holding in my hand. I threw the tape in the bin outside once again and went back to bed. I was a little rattled, but my exhaustion won out. I planned to figure out the mess in the morning. Friday, October 13th. I had the day off and tried my best not to think about the tape, but something about it was alluring, almost like it had a hold over me. I distracted myself throughout the day with video games and playing on my phone, but eventually my mind would wander back to it. I called Steve once again, and of course he didn't respond or call back. At this point, I was definitely worried about him, but based on his response the day before, I had assumed he'd wanted to be left alone. It was starting to get late, and eventually I couldn't take it anymore, so I went out, found the tape from the bin outside, and set up my VHS player. Everything inside of me was screaming at me that this was a terrible idea, but my curiosity was winning out. I had to know what was on that tape. I took a deep breath and inserted the tape into the VHS player. As the screen flickered, I began to feel a deep sense of dread. I couldn't pinpoint why exactly, but deep down I think I knew that I had made a mistake, that there was no turning back from. The image that appeared on the screen seemed to be from the point of view of the backseat of a vehicle, which was on the highway. It was hard to see as whatever it was crouched down, as if hiding from whoever was in the driver's seat. I watched in anticipation, but nothing happened immediately. A call rang out from my cell phone, startling me. It was Steve. I quickly answered. "Hey man, I saw your post. Wait for me. I'm on the way," Steve said, his breath heavy. "Steve, why weren't you answering earlier?" I responded. "Listen, I'm sorry, but you just gotta trust me. Wait for me, and don't watch that tape until I get there." The camera on the screen began to move, and suddenly it all clicked. It was in the backseat of Steve's car, and now it reared up. Steve was in full view, on the phone driving. He hadn't noticed it yet. "Steve, behind you," I wasn't able to finish as the phone call dropped. The camera's point of view lunged towards him, and the screen went to static. That was the end of the tape. Join us next time for the continuation of this series.